First of all, you must have seen how they are trying to portray a picture of a much more relaxed version of Taliban as compared to 96 to 2001 era version of theirs. So if they can do so to the Western audience, to the Western community, to the Western set of nations, I think they can also pander to the Chinese population and the Chinese Communist Party.
Namaste everybody, welcome to Citti Media. My name is Sharan Citti, your host. Today we are joined by Dr. Anand. He is an assistant professor at the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations, Manipal University, and he's also the coordinator for Center for China Studies. Dr. Anand, it's really good to have you here, sir. Namaste.
Really nice speaking to you also, Sharan.
Absolutely. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, the sun has come out in Manipal after a long time, and
Right.
it's a reason for rejoicement.
Right, I can't wait to get back there, once more. So looking forward to that. Dr. Anand, on that note, if I may proceed with my first question, sir. Now we've seen a rapid change in China's policy because initially when there were reports of the Taliban's possible takeover of Kabul and overall Afghanistan, we saw that China took a backseat and it said that we may have to consider a different policy against the Taliban, but now we've seen a sudden U-turn. Why is this policy coming, sir?
See, for a long time, even though even in its previous avatar, the Chinese didn't recognize the Taliban rule, right? And they have seen of late that the United States is increasingly in a haste to pull out of Afghanistan. And maybe that rapid haste to pull out of Afghanistan is something which must have inspired the Chinese to make quick moves into perhaps a Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. I think that can be the reason why. I mean, there are various factors which actually go into why China wants to engage more with a Taliban-dominated or a Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. It has all the, it can have various reasons ranging from resources to domestic security to regional security, as well as questions related to the shifting world order. So there are a lot of reasons ongoing in the past 3-4 years. But what I feel most is that because of this sudden kind of shift in the US policy, to somehow get out of this situation, might have ramped up Beijing's accelerated pace of engaging with the Taliban. Though I would say that they might be doing it with a bit of caution because after all, at the end of the day, it is the Taliban and all countries across the world are just waiting and watching what they're going to do. So I think the same caution will be exercised by the Chinese also.
Right. You bring up 2-3 very interesting points. One is the regional dynamics, but we'll come to that later. But first of all, obviously the news reports that are coming out in the last 2-3 days is that the Taliban is going to oversee a huge deposit of natural resources in Afghanistan, which may even quantify up to $1 trillion or even more. And the Chinese are eagerly eyeing towards this. So how do you think the Chinese are going to plan ahead, having this news in current knowledge?
See, in the earlier situation, of course, China always had an eye on the resource in Afghanistan. But the situation before the US withdrawal was that the US was present in whatever form it was. And as a result, there is a limit to what the Chinese could do, right? And yet another situation was the domestic scenario. The domestic scenario in Afghanistan was very dynamic in the sense that, there was a government, of course, but again, that was facing a lot of heat from the Taliban resurgence. So that instability, perhaps, the deteriorating security environment, all of these considerations must have played into the way in which the Chinese have not gotten much of a benefit from the Afghanistan's resources in the past decade or so. But what we expect now is that if at all, that is the Taliban takes over and consolidates control over Afghanistan, makes it more stable, then that might be the point where the Chinese may go in and try to get more control of the resources. Because remember, the Chinese they already have a mine there in Ainak, a copper mine, which they have been trying to develop, but none of it has worked so far because of exactly the reasons which I have told you, that instability and insecurity in the region. So once situation settles down, that will be when I think the Chinese may go in for the resources.
Right. It's very interesting that you mentioned that, Dr. Anand, because at this point, I think it is quite obvious that the Chinese are intending to introduce BRI projects well into Afghanistan as well, for connectivity, for resources, and for achieving the strategic depth as well, and for different reasons. So especially keeping in mind the possibility of these future of these projects coming up in Afghanistan, how do you think it will come up in the future? What are the possible projects, and how do you think the equation of Pakistan will come into this?
Well, we all know that the Belt and Road Initiative, which started in 2013, initially all of it was concentrated on the Eurasian landmass connectivity, right? And then came the Maritime Silk Road. We know today that the CPEC is perhaps the biggest project in the entire Belt and Road Initiative, especially its 21st century, it's the land route of it, right? And that is passing through Pakistan. Now there is an effort to bring in Afghanistan also into the picture. In fact, the Belt and Road is very important from the perspective of Afghanistan because, or not only because of its historical place in the Silk Road, but also because it is actually from that point on when the Chinese brought up this revitalized Silk Road, and the United States simultaneously started talking about withdrawal. That's when the real change from China towards Afghanistan started. So we certainly see a huge imprint or a huge place of the Belt and Road Initiative, the upcoming diplomatic engagement with the Chinese will have towards Afghanistan. And now how much of it is linked with Pakistan? Well, there is a lot of analysis which is going around saying that China's Silk Road projects in Afghanistan will be an offshoot of the CPEC, or basically the CPEC will now go into Afghanistan also, one branch of it.
Right.
This is a possibility, certainly. And again, just as in the case of resources, I might say that the Chinese must be waiting for more stability to come into the picture so that they can go in. We have seen actually one trend over the past 20 years. The Chinese have been very cautious with Afghanistan. Unlike the boldness with which they have approached Pakistan or Sri Lanka or any of those other countries, they have been a bit cautious with respect to Afghanistan.
Right.
Yeah, that is primarily because of the US presence. Now the US presence is out. They may be trying to get a reassurance from Taliban that stability will remain. And one very important aspect of that stability is what the Chinese are talking about is inclusiveness, inclusive government. So yes, whether that inclusive government will form, whether stability might return to Afghanistan under whichever leadership is going to come up, these are all questions which will be before the Chinese leadership, before they go in full throttle with their Belt and Road projects there.
Thank you so much for that elaborate answer, Dr. Anand. That brings me to another very interesting question. Now, we've seen how Pakistan's policy towards Uighur Muslims has been in the past, and in a very interesting interview to HBO, Prime Minister Imran Khan also said that it's the prerogative of the Chinese and it's an internal issue. And we believe that the Chinese are actually going to do something positive about it, is what he exactly said. Now, if we are technically seeing that a democracy like Pakistan is having such an approach to a possible genocide of a mass population in one of the Chinese provinces, How do you think the Taliban will play this out, especially knowing that it's a Islamic group by nature?
See, obviously, the Taliban, their origins are very much in the tribal, ethnic, as well as the religious dimensions of Afghanistan's past.
Right.
Islam plays a very important role in their identity, their politics, and therefore they must be really concerned about what is happening in Xinjiang. But the problem is that I feel that the Taliban is going to do the waiting game, because first of all, you must have seen how they are trying to portray a picture of a much more relaxed version of Taliban as compared to 96 to 2001 era version of theirs. So if they can do so to the Western audience, to the Western community, to the Western set of nations, I think they can also pander to the Chinese population and the Chinese Communist Party also in the same kind of equation. Because at the end of the day, the Afghanistan, if at all it comes in under the government which is formed by Taliban, it will definitely require reconstruction, a continuation of the reconstruction efforts, and that is why they have also said that they want India to stay behind, complete whatever reconstruction work they are doing, whatever developmental works they are doing.
Right.
They are not opposing it, at least in rhetoric. They would certainly want the Chinese also on board. And now we are seeing a future where perhaps they may not be counting much on Western investment coming from World Bank or IMF and all those kind of things, because if that has to come, they will have to compromise very much on their ideology, right? On their worldview,
Right.
on their perspective on governance. So just like any other illiberal regime, they might be counting on the Chinese largesse. And purely based on this consideration, I feel that they may remain, at least for the time being, silent on the Uyghur issue.
Right. Very
So
interesting. And
the Chinese investment.
right. No, it's a very interesting point that you bring up, especially because of the PR game that we are seeing in the last 1 week or 2 weeks. It's quite fascinating for a lot of scholars and journalists across the world, because we're actually seeing a new evolved version of the Taliban, surprisingly maturely handling things, while of course in reality might be different. Now that brings me to my last question. We've all seen the Cyanopath nexus across different strategic equations, right? They've been hand in glove with each other against to suppress India's regional growth. Now, in that sense, since a new player is in town in Afghanistan, that is China, how do you think the Cyanopath nexus is going to play out, and how will India fit into the equation? What is going to be the near future, sir?
Well, if we actually, from India, if we actually look to the north, China, Pakistan, Russia, North Korea, some of the Central Asian countries, and now Afghanistan. And also you have Turkey. From Turkey to North Korea and from Russia to Afghanistan, we are seeing a big block coming up north of our borders. And this is certainly a block which is not at all friendly towards India. So any incident which is happening in Afghanistan, if it is playing into playing into pushing Afghanistan towards that group, that will definitely be not in the interest of India. And this is what India is basically concerned about, that Afghanistan, because till now, the government in Afghanistan, the people in Afghanistan, most importantly, have very good kind of feelings towards India. They feel that India is a country which is helping them. A lot of Afghan students have come to India. Even the Afghan National Army had got some training from India. But today's Afghanistan, a possible government which is about to come up, doesn't have any connection with India, right? They are all connected to Pakistan. They are connected to their ideological supporters in West Asia. And of course, to a silent support coming from China. So India can't demand a pound of flesh, just like how the Pakistan can demand, or the Chinese can demand, or the Russians can demand by batting for Taliban at the international stage. We have seen very recently how the Russians, along with the Chinese, have been trying to kind of whitewash the Taliban a bit.
Yes.
While India is certainly not doing that. So, going by realpolitik, it is imperative that India keeps its relationship with whomsoever is in power in Afghanistan.
Right.
That's very essential for it. We have done the same despite of our civilizational or ideological connect with certain sections in Sri Lanka, whether it is in Bangladesh, whether it is in Myanmar. We have always retained the connection with the existing or the governments in Afghanistan, in our neighborhood. With perhaps one of the exceptions being the Taliban government from 96 to 2001. But I think the way in which India has very maturely, in a very prudent fashion, engaged with the current development or the current upcoming power in Afghanistan, I think that may continue because that is very important. Otherwise, what will happen is that we will completely write them off to this northern bloc, which is trying to, either we can say, strangulate India or contain India.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of truth in what you say, because even if we were to look at how Ahmad Shah Massoud of the Northern Alliance was initially against India, in 2 years, even they fell in place and they realized that India is a much more better ally than Pakistan was. So realpolitik does dictate our strategic interests in the region, and we can only wait and watch how India plays its cards. Until then, Dr. Anand, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really glad you could join us to speak about what is happening in Afghanistan today. And of course, we would love to invite you for more of our talks. And we hope that you can join us in the future too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, really, Sharon, for inviting me to this program. And I really loved interacting with you. And yes, we will meet again.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much. And to all our viewers watching this, please do like, share, and subscribe to our content. We will be bringing in regular updates from Afghanistan. Until then, this is your host, Sharon Citti, signing off.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.